Now I'd like to move to our first live offering of the morning, which is a panel of caregivers, care partners. And I know each of these individuals, and I know some of what they have been through. I know some of their philosophy on caregiving and care partnerships. And I know that you're in for a blessing and a treat as you listen to what they have to say this morning. Deborah Jackson will moderate the group this morning, and I would encourage you, if you have questions, to send those via the chat box on Zoom, and Deborah will address those as she moderates the panel. And she will also invite them each to give a little thumbnail of kind of their story as it regards to dementia. So I will go ahead at this point and turn over to Deborah Jackson as the moderator of our caregiver panel. Deborah?
Hi, everybody. How are you? Can everybody hear me okay? Welcome this morning. What an amazing conference to have an opportunity to participate in, number one. But such an incredible opportunity, I think, especially during uncertain times, for us to be able to come together and just, in the spirit of the title of the conference, offer hope and help to people that are on this journey. And I think in my own experience, I've been a caregiver to my mom for, it'll be 9 years total. Half of that time I was in Charlotte, North Carolina, and returned home for the Christmas holidays and never went back. So I sold everything I had and I remained in New Orleans with my mom to help and oversee her care. And so my mom, who is now 90, when all of this really started with us, she was 80. And so I didn't know, quite frankly, that we would even be here at this moment. And I'm very grateful. I'm grateful for so many things, but being able to see 10 years go by, even though it has been very challenging at times, is definitely a blessing. And so I'm just grateful and appreciative. And I'm really praying that this panel discussion, I don't think there's anything better than hearing from people that have gone through what you're going through, and people that have insight on the other side of it. And so I know that that will be a blessing to you. So I just want to start by introducing our panel participators. And I'll start with Beth Reinert. And Beth is a former caregiver herself, and she currently is and quite frankly, for a very long time, has been an advocate for people living with dementia-related illness and their care partners. And, you know, I like to include where I can what our panelists are focused and passionate about at the core of things. And Beth, for example, she really encourages and supports caregivers with hope, education, and resources. She does this on an ongoing basis. It's really a part of her nature and a part of her journey, but it's a part of who she has become in this journey. And Beth is also the founder of a concept that when she spoke at my summit, I learned a lot about, I identified with it, called contemplative care concepts. And I think that is something that has been very beneficial for other dementia caregivers. And then we have Linda Everman. And Linda also is a former caregiver and co-founder of Activists Against Alzheimer's, Faith United Against Alzheimer's, Women Against Alzheimer's. And she really is passionate and focused on building awareness, raising funds for research, advancing policy and legislative actions to support persons with dementia and their care partners, and has just she's just an outstanding person, and I look forward to you hearing from Linda as well. And then we have Dr. Don Windarf, who is Linda's husband. And so we have a husband and wife duo here. And Dr. Windarf is a former caregiver as well, retired PhD clinical psychologist, a husband, and met his wife Linda through advocacy. And so we find that this is kind of a continuing family. Once we meet people that have gone through this journey, it's like we become a big family. And then we have Gwen Wilson, who is a caregiver to her mother and husband with Alzheimer's and is a geriatric nurse practitioner. And we look forward to hearing from Ms. Wilson. And we have Dr. Rebecca Allen, who is a former caregiver to her sister and a University of Alabama professor of clinical geropsychology at Alabama Research Institute on Aging. And so with that, I find that knowledge is, we hear the cliche saying that knowledge is power, but I really do believe that knowledge also decreases our level of fear. The more we understand and the more revelation we have, then the less we can experience the fear of being able to move forward. And so I hope that we accomplish all of those things today in this panel. And so now I'm going to ask that each of the panelists we'll start with Ms. Beth, and I'll ask that each of the panelists just take a couple of minutes to share a little bit about your caregiver story, your caregiving story, and share it with everyone else so that people can know how much we identify with them and they also identify with us. Beth?
Thank you, Deborah. I'm coming from Mobile, Alabama. And the way that I first had any experience with Alzheimer's disease was with my grandmothers. I was a teenager when my first grandmother had Alzheimer's disease and got to watch that interaction with my family. And then my next grandmother, my mother's mother, had Alzheimer's disease while I was working as a recreation director on a special care unit, which is designed for people living with dementia. So I had a professional side as well as a personal side going on at the same time. And then 20 years later, my mother began to show signs of Alzheimer's disease. And that was when we really began our 8-year partnership. And I will say partnership because I gave, but I also received as much as I gave. And we experienced 4 years of assisted living together. And during that time, I wanted to help her feel a part of that community. So we didn't, I found my caregiving more of a ministry and a calling at that point because I began to reach out to the others that were living in the community as well. And that enriched my life. It gave me purpose, and it helped my mother feel more a part of that community. And then we moved into memory care where my aunt and uncle were living, and my uncle died. But before he died, he gave me all the information I needed to be able to take care of my aunt. So now I had my mother and my aunt, both with dementia. And then we moved into a nursing home for the next 4 years, the last 4 years of their lives. And so there I was, I'm managing 3 estates, theirs and mine. I'm providing all of the ins and outs of caregiving for them, and I'm loving them every step of the way. You know, before I started caring for my mother, I had just experienced the empty nest. I thought this was going to be me time, and I was going to get to pursue my career goals, but it turned out God had another plan. And that plan was to put me right back where I was before my children were born and be involved with people with Alzheimer's disease. And what a journey it was to be from the inside out. On the personal side is quite a different situation than when you're just working in that situation. So really, I just learned to trust God through all of that. There was so much to learn. And Danny, that song that you sing, The Unseen Hand, was there. You know, as we got further and further into the disease process, that's when I really began to experience the knowledge that God was there with us, because often it was very isolating and lonely, and I didn't know what to do next, but somehow those answers always came. And I just saw so many family members that didn't do the research and have the inclinations that I had. And so I just really wanted to advocate on their behalf and teach them and help those, even at a higher level. I became the ambassador for the Alzheimer's Association for 4 years to speak on behalf of people with dementia, and then ultimately ended up doing events and activities here in Mobile on behalf of people with dementia. So that's my story in a nutshell, Deborah.
Thank you, Beth. I know that story oh so well, and it's all 100% true. I'd like to also move to Miss Linda Everman and have you share a little bit about your caregiving story as well.
Thank you.
Linda.
Good morning, all.
Good morning.
So in 1994, my 81-year-old dad began to show symptoms of dementia. 3 years later, my 57-year-old husband was diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment. Dementia, Alzheimer's, mild cognitive impairment, all of these words and these diseases were new to me. For 18 years, I was the primary and often the only caregiver for both my dad and my husband. My dad died in 2001 and my husband in 2012, both from Alzheimer's disease. I might also say that during these years, I was in my late 40s, and I was at the height of my career with the University of California, and I had a teenager at home. This was a very dark and lonely time in our lives. In those years, there was very little written about dementia. I can name 2 or 3 books. And as sparse as the literature was, there was even less conversation. People simply didn't talk about it. Dementia was viewed as a failing, something to be ashamed of, something to keep to yourself. And so we did. Like so many caregivers, for so many years, I was silent. I strove to protect my loved one's dignity and say nothing to them or to others that would cause them to lose hope or to become despondent. But all the while, the door closed tighter and tighter, and we became more and more isolated. My story is not unique. Thankfully, there were people who broke through my wall of silence and offered support. Their acts of love, kindness, and compassion taught me the true meaning of the words, the ministry of presence, and proved to me what a powerful remedy the simple gift of our presence is to others or to someone who is hurting. When I think back on this time, I don't think about it in terms of caregiver burden or burnout. Instead, I think about it as a period of profound sadness. This experience fueled my advocacy on behalf of others. I understood that, like all chronic illnesses, dementia impacts the entire family, not just the person with the diagnosis. And to change something, even something as big as the trajectory of a puzzling disease, we have to face it and we have to talk about it. I thought that if I used my voice, I could affect change, and maybe, just maybe, I could spare others the pain that we had endured. My focus has been on building awareness, raising funds for research, advancing policy and legislative actions to support persons with dementia and their care partners. Along the way, I've encountered many who are both passionate and generous with their time and resources. And this has been my source of inspiration, hope, and healing. The path of advocacy is much slower and more complicated than I ever could have imagined. But regardless, I retain an unshakable belief in the power of individuals working together to make a difference in advancing better care, prevention, and one day a cure.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Linda. Appreciate you sharing. You do so much for the community and beyond. And so we're just so happy to have you. And Dr. Windarf, can you share your story with us as well?
Thank you. I'd be delighted to. Well, I don't know about delighted. This is always difficult. We've talked about this a lot. You know, we haven't done active caregiving in a number of years now, and I still dream about caregiving, maybe not every night, but almost every night. And then when we're about ready to do a conference or something like this, then it just all comes back. It's all, you know, it's always sort of there. So
Yes, so
I
true.
was sort of the secondary caregiver for my mom, who had Alzheimer's, and she was in a care facility, eventually a memory care unit. My father, who had Parkinson's disease and had some mild dementia with his Parkinson's disease, and then ended up eventually the primary caregiver for my late wife, Susan, who was originally diagnosed with Alzheimer's, which really fit with the symptoms and the pictures and all the tests and things available at the time. Turned out hers was vascular dementia from a lot of mini and eventually maxi strokes. And so there was a lot of physical impairment, and she ended up almost blind, and you know, couldn't do anything for herself. So that was rough. As a psychologist, one of the things that, because I used to work with families who were caregivers or who were living with dementia, did assessments for that. But a big part that hits me is this is all so very difficult. So I was very touched by the emotional aspect of just how stressful this is. And so a big part of my focus has always been, what do you need to do to take care of yourself? Because if you don't take care of yourself, then there isn't a self there to take care of another self. And, you know, everybody always tells you that you got to take care of yourself. Well, yeah, I've got it on my list. It's like 983 out of, you know, when do I have time and energy to do that? But it's crucial. So real quickly, if you watch the Men in Black movies, whenever they get into a really stressful situation, the first thing they do is, you need pie. So you need pie. Grilled salmon would be better. Mediterranean diet is what we need. But you need things that nurture yourself. You need a treadmill, because exercise is absolutely crucial. Hiking in the woods is better. Not everybody can do that. In one of the old Peanuts cartoons, Linus told Charlie Brown that this is a stressful life. Life itself is just very hard. And he thought that whenever a baby was born into the world, a new baby, the baby should be issued a banjo, which of course is absolutely correct, because music, the expressive arts, creativity is so important for the loved one that you're taking care of, but for you. Yeah, you need to express.
It changes the atmosphere.
Exactly. And you need to express, you need to create, you need to have something that nurtures your soul.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the last thing, and probably everybody knows this already, but the last thing you need is some good monkey ears.
A good laugh.
You need a good laugh. You need humor. Humor puts things into perspective. Humor is automatically sort of being able to look down and, you know, above and say, "Woo, that's weird," and get perspective. Yeah. Humor may be the single best thing you got going for you, but these are my
How about sleep?
Monkey ears. Sleep, yeah. I mean, we can get into the whole thing about brain health and what you do for your loved one and you do for yourself. That also helps lower your risk for every major disease. Yes, sleep and rest is crucial, and you can't have my monkey ears.
Thank you so much. I already feel great just watching you always. To your point, I do think that, and, you know, hopefully we'll get a chance to talk about that a little bit today, but caregivers in the throes of things right now, sometimes it's how do you do it? What's a strategy for resting when, you know, in your emotional state, you're unrest, right? And so they may want to rest, but there may be physical reasons why it's difficult for them, especially in this environment. So maybe you could even help us offer some strategies to people today in order to help them do that in such an intense, it's a heavy journey. And my experience, as with all of you, is it tends to continue to get heavier. And it also tends to become more isolating. not because you want to be isolated, but by the function of what the disease creates. And so, so hopefully we can bring more resource to people in that area. Thank you so much.
Loneliness is a
Oh yeah.
killer.
Yeah.
Loneliness underlies most major diseases in our country anyway.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And grief with this disease. At the root of it all, people are grieving. And so thank you so much. I can't wait for us to talk more. Next, Gwen Wilson, Miss Wilson, can you share with us in a few minutes your caregiving experience as well?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Winhorth, I think it is. That was good. I love to laugh. So, but first of all, I would like to just thank God for this opportunity because already I am reaping some benefits. But I'm going to come from the angle as I'm an active caregiver. And it all began in the 1980s when my maternal grandfather, we didn't know what was going on back then. You didn't hear a whole lot about Alzheimer's disease, but I helped my mother care for him. Then later, my maternal grandmother, she developed Alzheimer's disease. And each one of them were different. My grandmother, maternal grandmother, you know, she was just easy to care for, but we had more challenges with my grandfather. Then later on, my mother just showed some mild cognitive impairment. And she's kind of still in that phase. And my husband, he was diagnosed in 2012 at age 64. And at that time, when he received the diagnosis, it was getting close to the time, well, he had just retired and we were looking forward to travel because he worked a busy job. He was a manager of a tire store. He was a bass guitar player, loved to play his guitar. And so we were just looking forward to doing some great things together. And so I didn't understand it then, but we did get a little traveling in, and I guess the good Lord, he knows because he know I enjoy those things. So I have those memories to look back on. And so going to 2017, about 3 years ago, he had a pretty severe fall, hit his head and had some injuries. So he has progressively declined, requires a lot with ADLs and all of that. But I know we're talking about hope and healing, but in the midst of all these challenges, caring for my mother and my husband in the home, if I want to back up, you know, you heard I said that I retired in 2018. I didn't understand because I was praying to God about it, you know, just kind of direct me on this. But when I received a peace, you know, it's time now. And so sure enough, how things are unfolding now, it's like, God, I am so thankful that you led me to that path. And then he has blessed me with a job that not only I'm doing caregiving, but I'm helping other caregivers out there when I go in the home. Because when you have a personal experience, it comes from the heart when you're sharing with others and giving them hope. And so right now, I guess what I am learning through all this is patience. And I was like a schedule. My life was on a schedule. It doesn't work like this as a caregiver, you know, it gets off something else. And so I'm learning more how to readjust.
Yeah.
Readjust. It's a day by day thing. And I get up in the morning. What gives me strength and hope is having my devotion time with the Lord before I start my day and asking for direction.
Yeah.
And when little things come up, say, for example, I think right now it's just like toileting issues. And I don't know what the heck to do sometimes. And it's like the Lord will open a way, do it this way. So I think what I'm learning through all this is patience. Patience, and there's teaching me a lot of that. So and then my husband is a joy, and my mother is a joy to care for. I do little things like in the midst of this pandemic, we get in the car and I take them for a drive. They enjoy that. I try to do like, once or twice a week, just little things, and then just helping them to see and feel that, I'm a person, you care about me, because my husband, he'll hug me every day and he said, thank you so much. And then, it just gives me, it's like
the energy. It's like a boost.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It's an energizer and everything. So, but in the midst of it all, I just see God working.
I think we may have.
And they tell me, I don't see how you do it. What keeps you going? But anyway, to end that part, I thank God for this opportunity.
Well, we thank God for you. And I just want to mention to everyone that, remind everyone that Ms. Wilson, Ms. Gwen, is also a geriatric nurse practitioner. And so her experiences are broad and deep in this area. And so that must be what you're referring to now, having an opportunity to help others. Because I'm sure you see many of us, all of us, in the work that you do every day.
Yes.
And so thank you so much, Ms. Gwen. We appreciate you. And then finally, last but definitely not least, Dr. Rebecca Allen, we welcome you to please share a little bit of your experience as a caregiver.
Thank you. Thank you so much, you guys. It's just a real honor to be here today and share a little bit of my story in taking care of my sister. And I've resonated so much to what other panelists have said thus far. And I guess I'll tell you a little about my story. The overarching themes, I would say, would be gratitude. Just being steeped in gratitude for all the time I had the opportunity to be with my sister, and forgiveness would be the two things. So, so I had the privilege of being born into a family with older parents and much older siblings. And my parents both died of various cancers, but came along to about 2013 when my sister, who is 17 years older than I, started calling saying, hey, Beck, I need, can you pay my cell phone bill? Or I don't have money to do this, that, or the other thing. And then forward to 2015, at which time everything started to fall apart. So my sister Donna actually had vascular dementia, which has been mentioned before, the little mini strokes, transient ischemic attacks, TIAs, that eventually end up with big strokes. And what happened in 2015 is that my nephew had been living with his mama, with my sister, and he was incarcerated for a variety of different things, but all stemming from drug abuse. And my sister at that time in Kentucky, we've talked about long distance caregiving, then she was all alone. She had 3 cats, 1 dog, was a hoarder and a animal hoarder in the extent that she was not taking care of the animals. So her living environment was filthy, is the only way to describe it. There was animal feces throughout the house. My nephew, prior to being incarcerated, had just thrown debris on the side of his bed in his bedroom. So it was just a mess. And so what happened was that I ended up becoming my sister's guardian. She, at the time, already lacked capacity or money to name a durable power of attorney. And so I had to go through the court system in Kentucky to become first her emergency guardian and then her permanent guardian. And she had become the victim of financial abuse, financial exploitation. She had chronic pain issues, and a family friend was taking and selling her opiates, drugs overarching this whole thing too. Of course, she's in Kentucky, had to get her out of that house, started the process of getting her relocated here to Tuscaloosa. But of course, guardianship at this time is a state-governed activity. So I had guardianship over her in Kentucky, but my work toward bringing her to Alabama meant I'd have to become her guardian in Alabama as well. I was successful between June and December 2015. I did get her moved to Alabama in Clariverna Towers, and started the process of becoming her Alabama guardian. Then in February 2016, she had a massive stroke, and that she did not recover from that. She ended up in a local skilled nursing facility. So all of our plans about how we were going to have the sisterhood time did not work out. I had all the legal stuff on one side, but let's get to the hope, right? So here, best laid plans. Hey, God, here's how we're going to do it, God. First, we're going to do this, this, and this. And God says, I have a different plan for you. So my sister did have diminished capacity, from the get-go, and some trouble communicating because of the massive stroke she had. She did, of course, have memory issues. That's the hallmark of dementia, right? Within all of that, and even without her being, with her being in a skilled nursing facility, we were able together to share those moments, right?
Yeah.
Those contemplative prayer, dyadic story moments, to really have gratitude for the years we'd had together. We used to travel. We'd have a family vacation, my mom, sister, and I, yearly. So we had the opportunity to do some reminiscence, and then forgiveness. With all that substance use legal mess, there was plenty of forgiveness out there to be had for everybody concerned.
And I think too, Dr. Allen, you're exactly right. I think, I don't want to say a silver lining, but I guess in some ways a silver lining is what many of us are even seeing through this process. I'm going to say a divinely placed silver lining. And I, it's actually a great segue talking about forgiveness and revelatory experiences of what this journey has done in our lives. I'm still actively, obviously, a caregiver as well. And so thank you so much for the lead in too, because I want us to be able to, as a team of caregivers, to be able to provide as much emotional resource for people during this time of uncertainty. And so a few of the questions, we'll see if we can get through a few of these questions that I think may cause some deep thought that will help others to kind of have more of a deep beginning of healing in their lives right now. And so one of them I would ask is, and I'll start with you, Dr. Allen, what do you feel like one of your greatest revelations are in this journey about yourself?
It's all about and Dr. Potts knows, you can talk about it from a spiritual Christian perspective or a secular perspective, contemplative prayer or mindfulness. And so one of the most important things throughout my process that I've learned is it's all in being present in the moment with the person you love, right? Yep. And I'll put a very rapid plug in for Ira Byock's book about the 5 things. You guys have not read Ira Byock. It's really worthwhile. Number 5 is goodbye. We're not going to talk about that. We're talking about active caregiving. But the first 4, please forgive me, I forgive you, thank you, I love you.
Yes.
So the moment by moment, getting really into those 4 out of 5 things with the person who you were walking through this dementia journey with.
Yeah, that's incredible. Beth, what about you? What would you say your greatest revelation is on the other side of this journey about yourself?
There's so many, Deborah, but I agree with what Dr. Allen just said. But, I found as I went into the caregiving, when I took on that duty, as the daughter, I had really only had that full responsibility more from a professional side. And I just thought I could handle this, I could manage it. But I found out that I needed help. I couldn't do this by myself. In fact, it's not very much fun when you try to do anything by yourself. And I've learned that to try to engage, involve others in anything that I've tried to do. And the most wonderful example of that was our last effort was the Heart Song Singers. That was where we brought families and their care partners together with a lot of volunteers, and we would sing together on a weekly basis. And having those other people, those volunteers involved, just brought so much life and joy and more people that I've just learned that I need others in my life, no matter what I'm doing.
Thank you, Beth. I think too that one of the things that has changed about the time that we're in, I think there are threads, regardless of whether we're in the middle of a pandemic or not, that there are threads that run through all of them that weave together because, for many people, and I can speak for myself, even though I'm an only child. And so, I've been on this journey without any real family support, except for my cousin, whom I love, who is definitely a backup for me and a help in that way. It's isolating in and of itself. And so when you're looking at times where there's a concern about anyone coming in, or there's, 45% of people are asymptomatic with COVID, so you don't know, then you're in a whole nother scenario for caregivers. And so I don't know how anyone does it without Christ, quite frankly, because there are technical times right now that people are in where there is an incapacity to have anyone else present, unless you're married or unless you have siblings that are involved and everyone is close. So, these being around other people, having people in your life, even by phone or FaceTime, these are all things that can help us strategically to kind of get through this uncertain season right now. Thank you, Beth. I'd like to turn to Linda and Don, because I would like to know from both of you, what would you say the emotional or spiritual impact to your caregiving journey has been or was?
Go for it.
What big question? Well, I guess I'll kind of back into this. My overriding, what I bring out of this is that love endures. And it's almost a tagline with me to say this, but I say, the mind may forget, but the heart remembers.
It definitely does.
And so there were times when my dad didn't know I was his daughter, and there were times when my husband didn't know I was his wife. But there was never a moment when they didn't know that whoever I was, I loved them. And there was that connection. So we all need connection. And not only the care partners, but the person with dementia. We don't lose our capacity, our human capacity for love and connection. And one of the most transformative things that happened to me, I'll give a plug, was I was probably 12 years into my journey of caregiving when my friend at church, bless her heart, gave me Richard Morgan and Jane Thibault's book, No Act of Love is Ever Wasted. And I had read voraciously everything there was to know about dementia by that point, but I had not read about the spiritual dimensions of caregiving. And it just changed the way that I looked at things. It allowed me to realize that it didn't matter if they didn't know who I was. It didn't matter if whatever act of love I offered was forgotten 10 minutes later, but that putting that out there reverberated. And so I don't know that I can really answer your question.
You did answer the question, because I think that one of the things that is most powerful, if we get to the root of the grief and the transformation that is happening in the caregiver, this is the kind of the supernatural component about how God works, that while we're focused on the person that we're caring for, he's still focused on both his sons and daughters. Everyone in the picture, God is still focused on. And so this transformation is taking place in us while we are doing this work, right? And so it's a powerful answer to the question, because I think at the root of sadness and loneliness and grief for the caregivers is not just the losing of the person, but the acceptance and the surrender to the loss of what we had in mind, right? Yes. And that's a painful process. And yet it is still a transforming process, because that is what obedience and surrender to God's divine will is.
Well, and I think you realize that, I think you're changed, and you realize that love does not have to be reciprocated to be loved, to be loved. And so this was very eye-opening to me, I'll say, very affirming to me. And it gave me courage, and it also allowed me to see my loved one as a spiritual person with spiritual needs.
Correct. And we were spirit first.
Yes.
We were body second. We were spirit first. And so we kind of go back to the real core essence of who we are when we're forced to. And that's what I want to turn to you, Don, because I was listening to one of your videos and interviews with Dr. Potts, and one of the things that stuck out at me, it was very powerful. You were talking about this journey with your wife, how difficult it was, but you were also sharing about empathy, and you were talking about as difficult as it was, how you began to see things through the perspective, not necessarily of a doctor helping, but also as a transformative process for yourself, becoming deeper into this state of empathy with your wife. And that you I think the words you used, I wrote it down, you don't know what you know until you know it. And so
what you don't know, talking about denial. Yeah. You can't know what you don't know until you know it. So don't beat yourself up because somebody's, hey, you're in denial. Well, nobody says, oh, this is a Friday, Saturday, let's be in denial.
Yeah, right.
You don't know what you don't know until you finally know it. And very often that happens in a very rough way. And I think you've already answered my question. That's a big part of what I eventually learned was focusing on personhood, because there's something about the core, the essence, the soul, who that person is at a very deep level that it may be very difficult for them to express it. It may be very difficult for you to access it or see it, but it's there. And it's so helpful to be able to say, okay, this is the person that I've loved. There's a little piece just came out. There's a little, at the end of both her late husband's and her father's lives, both of them, although they really couldn't communicate with Linda, said, I love you, just before they died.
Yeah.
Something was still there. So focusing on personhood, it's very easy with dementia to see all the things that are lost, the things that people can't do anymore. Those just hit you in the face. That's very easy. There are many, many things that people can do and are still doing while they're living with dementia. And there are ways that we can learn to access some of that if we're open to that. And if we're willing to, to get into that. The expressive arts, I think music particularly, is a wonderful way, but there are other ways too. And so we have to learn those things. But yeah, I like you bringing up the whole thing of empathy, because, early on as a caregiver, I was very aware, even though I'd worked with lots of caregivers, I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't know what's coming next. I only know that I've got to do it all, and I'm responsible, and I have to do it perfectly. It has to be the absolute best caregiving that anybody in the known universe has ever done, which is,
Right.
I mean, that's just a setup for burnout. I knew all about burnout. I lectured about burnout. I had all this insight and intellectual knowledge of it, and I did all the right things to try and prevent it. And I got massively burned out, which for me looked a lot like anger.
Yes.
But I had to realize that my wife, in particular, thinking more so than my mom, she didn't have an instruction book for how to live with dementia either. And she was going through all sorts of stuff on her end, part of which was concern for me. Part of what I saw as being resistance on her part when I'm trying to muscle her around and walk her down the hallway or, do bathing or all that kind of, what I saw as resistance was her fear of falling, of making me fall, of hurting me, of displeasing me, of doing something wrong. So I had to get in touch with that. And some of that, finally, I was able to ask her about, and she was able to tell me some of those things.
Yes. I think, just a couple of things just off what you're saying. I think that it's very different, and I say this often, communicating versus connecting, right? Because you can communicate with someone and nothing be exchanged both ways, right? But you have to become a much better connector or become more sensitive to connecting. And this is where I believe God comes in, because there are those moments, even for me as a caregiver, where it's very intense. It's a challenging period. As you know, it comes in waves. My mom, it's working for her. My mom is very headstrong and stubborn. And I mean this really, stubborn is probably not the right, independent and fierce. And yet it can work against you when you're trying to get things done. And because I am the only person, then that makes it even more intense. And then all of a sudden, in the middle of that, there's this one moment where she will say something that is what my mom would say. And that is the moment that I know, first of all, came divinely, because it came in a moment that didn't make sense. I wasn't expecting it. And it brings you back to the place of knowing that there is a capacity to connect, even when they are unable to communicate, right? And so thank you so much for sharing that. This leads me to another question that I would like to ask of Ms. Gwen. Ms. Gwen, I'd love to ask you, since you are also currently still caregiving, how has the pandemic directly impacted your caregiving during this time?
Well, one particular thing is my husband and mother, they love the adult daycare center, and which is Care and Days. And so when that closed down, they didn't get the social stimulation that they got in higher level than what I could really give, I guess. And so my mother particularly, she loved the games and different activities, whereas my husband, you know, he didn't care for it as well. They found things that was more appealing to him, like music therapy, the pet therapy and things like that. So that has impacted me a lot. But then on the positive side of this pandemic that's been going on, it has slowed me down even more, because I think about, okay, do I really need to go out and do this today? Do I really need to put this in my schedule? So it has put me in a more peaceful place, really. So that's what I can see in the pandemic.
What about, thank you so much, Ms. Gwen. What about you, Dr. Allen? How has this time during the pandemic affected you directly?
Well, let me say that my sister died in January 2019, so I'm not currently caregiving. But related to that specifically, on COVID, one of the gifts that God has given me in this time is a sense of gratitude and thankfulness that I am not trying to be with her during COVID when I can't get to her, right?
Yes.
Think about all of these people who are out there in these skilled nursing and assisted living facilities, and their family can't get to them except virtually like this. You can't hug them, you can't kiss them, you can't tell them face to face that you love them. And there's something about that 3D presence. And this is fabulous, and I'm so glad to be here and we are together. It's still different than being there 3D. So I'm thankful and so hold in prayer all of the people in nursing homes and all those people who love them and can't get there.
Yes. This is so, that's so powerful, because I can't tell you how many times, Dr. Allen, I have thought to myself, number one, that I'm glad that I'm able to right now, you know, care for my mom. And then at the same time, kind of balancing this concern that if something were to shift, then we would potentially be separated, right? And so this is a question that I would actually like to ask just very briefly of everyone. And if you had to share just one word of encouragement to people right now during this time that are caregiving and caring for someone specifically that has dementia, if you could offer that encouragement in one word or a sentence, what would it be to people? And you can start, Dr. Allen.
Here I am trying to think. The word, again, I think is gratitude for me. Gratitude, love. The immediate, what comes to mind for me is Gospel of John. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it.
Beautiful. Thank you. Beth, what about you? You might want to unmute.
I'm muted.
I've done that.
Now I'm
Okay.
unmuted. Okay. I would say trust is the one word, but what I often like to say is don't run from life's interruptions. Therein may lie your greatest blessing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I just want to remind people also, as we're going through, that if you have any questions, anything that comes to mind, please submit your questions through the chat section. We'd love to hear from you in the time that we have left. We want to be able to be a resource for those of you that are attending today. So please submit your questions. This will be a good time. And so what about you, Gwen? What word or sentence would you share as encouragement to people today?
Well, I have to give a scripture on that. And it's it's James 1:2, and it says, count it all joy when you go through divers, temptation, or test. So I have to say that to myself when the challenges get steep. I said, count it all joy. Count it all joy. And because it's working patience. And so I'm truly getting more patient. Haven't gotten there, but I can see that's what's being worked out in me. And so a lot of times in life, when we go through tests, we're so quick, me included, why? But we should ask, what am I to learn through this experience?
Thank you so much, Ms. Gwen. What about Don and Linda? What about you guys?
Okay, we're unmuted.
Well, I have a couple of things. I would say one thing. Okay, forgive yourselves. Forgive yourselves for your real or perceived shortcomings. Be as kind to yourself as you are to your loved ones. You know, like we talked about earlier, we don't know what we don't know until we know it. And so one of the things that I love is Maya Angelou's quote, do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better, but forgive yourself.
I love that.
Yeah, that's so good. Yeah, I'm not sure how to narrow it all down either. I guess one thing I would say is you need more help than you think you do, and there is help out there if you can ask for it, and ask for it very specifically. This is what I need. And where I come from on that is I went to the pastor of the church that my late wife and I have been going to for years and said, I need help. And he said, okay. And he talked to a few ladies, and within a week, there was a crew of about 8 ladies who took turns taking care of my late wife all day while I was still working for nothing. And they did that for 2 years.
I think that's really powerful, Don, as well. I think also it's an area where we have room to get better and improve, which is one of the reasons why this conference is so powerful, because, you know, Danny and Ellen are prioritizing the faith community being involved in knowledge, because so many of us have experiences where, and quite frankly, I don't mind sharing, I am one of those people where the church, out of lack of awareness perhaps, and perhaps lack of priority, just not very present for caregivers, even though there are 53 million caregivers in this country. And so programs like this help raise awareness. And during the pandemic, you know, churches are really overloaded right now. So I definitely see that's an area of opportunity, and yet getting help or being able to make a call to one person. I say to people, if you just have one person that you can call as support. For me, it's my cousin. Spiritually, it's my longtime spiritual advisor and now my friend, Sister Dr. Orlisa. If you have one person you can call, even if you're in a moment of despair, right? It will help you to kind of move forward into the next moment, because what I've learned is these moments do pass. And even though you're in the intensity of the grief and the pain of giving care to someone with dementia, because of we don't just have one loss, we have a loss continuously, right? That it is helpful being able to move through one phase of that intense moment, because this too shall pass. And then God will help you recover. Yes, Don.
Yeah, let me say something that's available to people right now during the pandemic thing. Linda and I do sing-alongs with people from several different respite care programs. They can't meet in person anymore, but we do Zoom just like this, sing-alongs, And the respite care programs are just being tremendously innovative in coming up with all kinds of activities. They may take them materials, they may take them special gifts. There's all sorts of things going on. So I'd encourage you to find out about respite cares. They're usually church-based, and tap into that as a resource.
That's really, really good. That's really good. How are we on time, Dr. Potts?
We're fine on time. We're fine on time. I would just encourage people to submit questions through the chat
Yes, I was just
function
gonna
if they
say that.
like. Yeah, we're doing well though. Thank you.
Okay. I would like to touch on something that you guys had mentioned before. You were talking about generally about, well, we were touching on anger, we were touching on sadness, but I want to touch on for a minute this idea of anger, because it's something that I didn't know about myself, quite frankly. And I think it's a it's a real thing. And it's a very real thing. And so what I've learned about it, and I'm going to come out to you guys to share maybe what emotion through this journey surprised you the most about yourself, right? And so for me, I just want to kind of start that by talking about what I learned about anger, and not rage, but just anger. And I learned about myself and about these situations that what we often experience as dementia caregivers specifically are, it's just such a lack of control. And it's not just not having control, it's the fact that you realize in different moments that so little is within your control. And so when you have a moment or a period where you have something that you feel you can wrap your arms around, like the routine, and then suddenly your knees buckle because something else happens. And so the anger underneath the anger, for me, I learned was really the lack of control and the consistent lack of control. So what emotion would you share? And you can just one word in one sentence as to the emotion that surprised you the most through the journey. And let's start with, let Beth and then Don, and then we'll go through.
Yeah, I think one that jumps out at me right now is fear. I was always afraid I wasn't doing it right, well enough. I was going to let my mother down. And over time, you know, I had to rely on scriptures to help me overcome those fears, and just to know that even if I didn't do it right, I was doing the best I could, as we've already talked about, and I had to forgive myself and just keep going. There's no, you don't get to stop.
It's okay. It's okay. And be kind to yourself. I had to learn that. Be kind and patient with yourself. Okay, so you got angry. That's okay. You're human. You're human. You're not Jesus. We are not the savior in this process. We are the hands and the vessel, which means we don't get to decide when our loved one passes away. We don't get to decide how they're going to pass away. We don't get to decide any of that. And it releases this pressure to be reminding ourselves of this on a consistent basis, that they're passing through, we're passing through, and we don't have full control. What about you, Don and Linda? What emotion would you share?
Yeah, anger was a big one for me. And I was used to, as a psychotherapist, I was used to knowing that anger covers up a whole lot of anxiety, particularly if you're male. You know, we're really good at covering up other emotions with anger, but we don't have a monopoly. Females do it okay too. But what I found out was it was also, for me, it was covering the ongoing grieving that you were talking about earlier, Deborah, that you're constantly losing something about the person, about the relationship. It's constant grieving, and my anger was covering up a lot of that. And it was very nasty. I was mean. I was, you know, it was awful.
Yeah, anger, fear, grief.
Lack of control.
Lack of control.
Yeah.
Linda?
I think rather than naming the emotion, I'll say that it was the realization that all of these emotions were really masking our grief.
Yep.
And I found myself correcting my late husband. And somewhere along the line, I had corrected him, and he turned around and said to me, not meanly, but he said to me, "Why do you always have to be right?" And that was,
I remember you sharing that.
and that was like wake up call, you know. And I thought, I immediately thought in myself, what? Well, I don't have to be. But I realized that if I could make him understand, if he could get it right, then everything would be back to normal. So it was covering my grief. I wanted it to be normal, you know. And so then when I could let go of that and realize that it was better to be kind than right.
Thank you so much. That's so powerful. I want to take a moment with that to let everyone know about Ellen's book. Ellen's book is a pocket guide for Alzheimer's caregivers. And so I just want to make sure that everyone, thank you, so that everyone knows about that. A pocket guide for Alzheimer's caregivers. And actually that is by Danny and Ellen. And so I just want to make sure we offer resources to people along the way. And I think we have, let me ask Gwen and Dr. Allen as well about your emotion that you learned about yourself.
Really briefly, because I want to hear from Gwen, but I resonate with what you guys are saying about the anger and how the anger can cover our grief and fear. At one point, I said to my sister in a fit, "I did not give birth to you." And after I said that, I was horrified that I would say something, you know, and yet that offered the opportunity to experience her forgiveness and later for me to forgive myself. So frequently it's much more difficult for us to forgive ourselves than to experience the forgiveness of others.
Absolutely. Thank you. What about you, Gwen?
One of the things for myself is fear of the future and trying to keep my mind in today, get through today, one day at a time. Because me personally, I'm always a planner. I've always been a planner, and thinking about the future, you know, what is it going to be like? When is this going to happen? And so, and that stresses me out, increase my anxiety level. And so that is the thing that I have to work through.
Yes, we have a question that came in, but I'm gonna, to your point, I get asked all the time, or I talk to people or minister to people or counsel people that are dealing with so many different issues. And at the root of many of the things that they're dealing with is this expectation of what is about to happen or going to happen or has not happened yet. And so one of the tactical, I'm gonna use the word tactical strategy for myself, is when I feel that I'm getting in this place of worry or anxiety, I actually tangibly ask myself, am I thinking about something that has not happened yet or may not ever happen? Because in the beginning, the people, the resources of groups and places that I went to assist me 6 years ago were all telling me what was going to happen with my mother. And so I chose to disengage because spiritually, I didn't want anyone to define what God knew about what would or wouldn't happen with my mom. And I didn't want to present that in my caregiving experience with her. So it's being able to be present in this moment right now. My mom is with me. In this moment right now, we have everything we need. And so whatever is to happen because of the pandemic and whatever all of that is, right now, we're good. And so that's the way I minister to myself in these moments. So thank you, Gwen. That's so incredibly true. And so I want to get to one of, at least hopefully a few, but one of the questions we members who don't think the person has had dementia or has dementia. And so how do you handle it when a family member or family members don't think that the person has dementia or has had it? And I would venture to say that could be a level of denial, but I'm going to start with Don. Tell us what your thoughts are on that, if you don't mind.
Mike on it. You got any thoughts? Let them take care of that person for about a week and then get back with you.
Yeah, I think, you know, and I'm going, whoever would like to answer that, just, you know, kind of, you know, give me a thumbs up or a wave. But I would say that that is a lot, and I'll qualify, I'm not yet a licensed counselor. I'm working my way there. But that could very well be someone that is just not wanting to face the reality because they're able to see themselves separate from it. You see, when we're not standing close,
Right.
then we can separate ourselves from a caregiver's pain or from the person's pain, that because sometimes the person with dementia is not necessarily in pain. Their reality is their reality. But the caregiver is oftentimes carrying that pain because they are going through it day by day. And so that's a way of being able to separate yourself from the pain or the burden or the challenges of it from the reality. And so that's my thought about that. And you have to be able to accept where people are. And if that person is at that place in the family that their position is this person does not have dementia, and you are the person caring for someone or whatever the scenario is, then you can let them be in that place. If that's where it's not going to change the reality, but if that's the reality they want to live in, then that's okay. Yes, Linda.
Well, I agree with you. I guess what I would add to it is care partners have so much to deal with. You don't need to take that on. Just let it go.
Let it go.
Just let it go.
Let it go. It's not going to change.
With somebody that's out of town and removed from the whole situation, and they come in for a very brief visit and they see the person kind of at their best. They're on familiar turf. They're doing the same things they do every day. And you don't really experience it unless you see the ongoing kind of a thing, or you see the person in a difficult situation or a novel situation, and then it really shows up. But
Yes.
you know, if you come in from out of town, you may also have some guilt about that you're not there doing enough and helping enough, and it's all falling on somebody else's shoulders.
Yeah, and caregivers have enough on their plate without having to justify or
Right.
take on others. Right. And I guess my other words of advice to a caregiver is trust yourself. You know your loved one better than anyone, better than the doctors, better than the experts, better than the social workers. So yes, seek knowledge, seek advice, but trust yourself in your relationship because you're the expert.
Yeah, it doesn't mean you're not going to make some mistakes, but you're going to do as good a job as anybody.
Yes, you're going to make mistakes. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay not to get it right. We're not supposed to get it all right. We're not saviors. We're vessels. And I would keep saying that to yourself as often as you have to, which is why our time with the Lord has to be a priority, because he can download into us what is needed for us to be able to go back out and be centered. I've said to Ellen, I said it in my keynote address, if you're not centered on something, you won't be tethered to anything. And so for us, that should be Christ. And so we also had someone to ask about or to ask for suggestions on what to do if you have, when your person is also very hard of hearing who has dementia. And Dr. Allen offered, you offered something on chat. Can you share that with us?
Sure, there were a couple of great suggestions.
And then we'll wrap up. I'm sorry, then we'll wrap up after that.
There were a couple of great suggestions. Ellen, for example, said face the person, lip reading's important, and Beth talked about carrying a pad of paper. But to make everyone aware, at UA, the Speech and Hearing Clinic does evaluations regarding hearing, and there actually are very effective hearing aids. And you can do challenge trials for people with cognitive impairment to see if they would be okay wearing a hearing aid. I particularly recommend Dr. Marcia Hay McCutcheon. She has experience working with older adults with a variety of cognitive impairment.
Thank you so much. We're going to wrap up. There's one I saw that I think I'll say that I don't know if we're able to do it, Danny, but if we're able to maybe answer some of the questions via chat even after, then that we can type in, maybe that would be a good option for a few that came in at the last minute. But I saw one that says, how do you handle your person who looks down and hesitant when walking? That may be something that we can also type an answer to that. It might be more of a technical kind of question. I don't want to say medical, but more of a physiological question that can be answered. But I just want to wrap up by encouraging everyone. I don't know how many people we have had attending this conference so far, or how many people God will bring after to view this conference. But I would say that one of the things that I would impart to people to caregivers is, number one, it is so incredibly important to be rooted in Christ during this time. I believe people have options of how they want to live their faith, but for us here and for those that are coming to this space for a sense of help and hope, God is doing supernatural work in the lives of caregivers through, I believe, all suffering, and in particular, this particular journey as a caregiver. And so we have to prioritize ourselves first, because if this is a co-partner journey where Christ is leading it and we're the vessel in it, then if we kind of step out on our own to do this journey, then we're leaving our pilot behind. And so the pilot of this ship is always Christ. And even though we are human and we get that intermingled in the throes of giving care, we have to be reminded and continually ground ourselves in the fact that we don't have full control over flying this plane. And as we daily come to the Lord in surrender and understanding that, there's a beautiful exchange that takes place in our praise and our worship, in our pouring out, in our sharing our anguish and despair, where he can actually take it. The Bible says, cast your cares on him. And so if we take that literally, then if we literally cast them onto him, then he will take that and then he will exchange supernaturally those things we cast on him with what he has in himself, which is his strength, his courage, his power, his long suffering. But we have to give the exchange. We have to give what we have in order for him to fill us with what he has. And so that is what I would impart to everyone, and to do your absolute best to hear and receive what is in this conference today. Go back and listen again, because the Lord is working through it and he is giving you replenishment for what you need in order to continue on this journey. Thank you for all of our panelists, for those of you that have gone through the shadow of the valley of death and have come out on the other side of all of this, and for being such servants in your acceptance through the entire journey, so that you are a light and a voice for those of us that are still going through it, that have not come out on the other side, that you will come out on the other side. You won't die. God, you will survive through this and persevere through it. And you have a testimony of people here that have done so. And you have a testimony of people that you can see how the journey has changed them, even coming through to the other side. So the hope for you is knowing that you can do this as we stay rooted in Christ. So thank all of you. I'm sure we're going to share more resources for people through the process. And thank you so much, Ellen and Danny, for doing this conference. Thank you.
Well, Deborah, we are so thrilled that you all have joined and that you all have said what you have said, shared what you've shared. I really don't know what to say. It's been so powerful for me to sit back and listen to this. And we also appreciate the comments. We appreciate the questions, and we'll try to get to those. So thank you all so much for this. It's so powerful.